Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for yet another in the series of NR Times roundtables, where we focus in on a specific area. And this morning, we're going to be talking about a crucial area, the future of spinal care. I'm delighted to say that we're joined this morning by a distinguished group of panelists that bring with them a wealth of experience and insight. And they're going to share that with us over the course of about an hour or so this morning. So to get things going, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, say a little bit about their organisation and their specific area of focus, and then we'll continue with a wide-ranging discussion covering a range of topics, but all focused on the future of spinal care and the big issues there. So I'd like to start by asking Harvey to introduce themselves, and then we'll work our way around our group of panelists. Harvey.
Thank you, Alastair. Hi, everybody. So my name is Harvey Sihota. I've been living as a paraplegic since 2009, when I had a fall and broke my T12 vertebrae. I'm a full-time wheelchair user and a pretty independent paraplegic, I would say. I'm the founder of Neurokinex, a not-for-profit network of community rehab hubs in the south of England. We're 10 years old this year, and we've got 3 centres, Hemel Hempstead, West Sussex and Bristol. And our primary focus is delivering activity-based rehabilitation and wellness programs for spinal cord injury in the community. In addition to that, my day job, I'm the chief executive at Spinal Research, which is a medical research charity that supports scientific endeavour to cure paralysis. We focus mostly on catalysing and accelerating the field to make restoration of function a reality. I'm passionate about accessible models for neurorehabilitation, science and technology, of course, and demystifying rehabilitation for the spinal cord injury community.
Great, thanks very much, Harvey. Dee, if I could come to you next, please.
Hi, hi everyone, lovely to be here. I'm an occupational therapist. I started my career 30 years ago. I had a student placement and then went on to have a job at what was then Oswestry Spinal Injury Unit, but now the Midlands Centre for Spinal Injury, and that sort of started my passion for working in spinal injury and neurology. Then I spent about 18 years of my career working in America in rehab units, and back here I've been working for 5 years in for Neural Pathways, and we're a company that provide rehab in the home, in the community, and in a clinic called the Neuro Hub, where we do sort of hands-on rehab, and we have we do a lot with functional electrical stimulation, as well as trying to just keep on top of the latest tech coming out there. We have some sort of sensor-based rehab devices and robotics. So so continue to be excited about rehab and what's possible, and just sort of feel just passionate about just keeping that momentum for people seeing what their potential is. I guess I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but what I'd see a lot when people are being discharged from hospital, they're not being given that vision of what their potential is. And so that I think that's what's exciting, to help people reach their goals. And it's been interesting to sort of see the perspective, having worked in spinal injuries 30 years ago and now seeing people discharged now with, I would say, less belief in what is possible than we used to give people 30 years ago. And so that's a whole nother subject that we can carry on, but that's just a starting block for what I sort of see over the years.
Great, thanks, Dee. And I'm certain we're going to come back to those themes that you've mentioned.
Exactly, yeah.
For the discussion.
Yeah. I'm just going to shut this window because there's some background noise, but I'll be right back.
Okay, Derek, if we could come to you next, please.
Sure, Alastair, yes. Well, I'm a founder of Anatomical Concepts, which is a business I started more than 25 years ago now, which is a horrific thought. When I started the business, I'd been a visiting professor at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. I saw a great product, and for very commercial reasons decided, we'll start to import that into the UK. But going back in time to the beginning of my career, I was originally My first degree was in control systems engineering. I was always interested in healthcare and did a PhD in bioengineering, which took me to Canada and the US, where I worked in orthopedics and children's rehab, mainly with cerebral palsy, spina bifida, and so on in the early days. And came back to the UK as an academic, and I got involved in many research projects, really, both running them, and then latterly, before I left academia, I was involved in the Scottish office and in Europe in strategic planning of research in rehabilitation. So that's one of the few things of being a bit older that's a benefit. I've managed to do lots of different things. So I think, I listened to Dee, what she said about the expectations of people these days. And I certainly see that too. And that's one of the things that worries me. Despite all the great technology that's coming out, many people still don't have access to this, nor do they have the attitudes and beliefs that take them forward. And one of the things that really interests me is health span for everyone, being able to extend the useful lives of people. No one really wants to live forever. We don't want to spend 20 years necessarily not being able to achieve the goals that we value. So this is what sort of is shaping our business going into the future, is looking for ways that we can drive health span for everyone, whether they're spinal cord injured or just like you and I.
Great, thanks very much, Derek. Kate, if I can come to you next. Could you just say a few words about yourself and your organisation and your areas of interest, please?
Oh, hello there. I'm Kate Russell. I've been around for many years now, and I am a co-owner and co-director of Community Case Management Services. We case manage brain, spinal injury and other catastrophic complex injuries. Now, you've probably all seen the Call the Midwife on the series. Well, not long after that era was my era. And we, of course, I was brought up in the Bedfordshire area. So Stoke Mandeville Hospital then operated out of Nissen huts. And as I was very pivotal in setting up an intensive care unit at Luton Dunstable Hospital, I was often poached by Stoke Mandeville Hospital because we had never had paramedics to bring our spinal clients in from various areas throughout the country and the world. And if I tell you back then, we used to bring our clients into Stoke Mandeville and we would ventilate on an open ward in a Nissen hut. And in that same ward, we would have young Arab princes who had paid to have their pressure sores developed with various infections, pseudomonas, etc., on the other end of the wall. So the progress that I've seen with the management of spinal injury has increased phenomenally over these years, and we would never dream of doing such things now. And consequently, the life expectancy and much more importantly, the quality of life has improved phenomenally. And I just managed to come in time with my technical details to catch out what you were saying of the expectations of life now are far more than they were in my early days. And the progression of childhood injury, and obviously it's the number of years post-injury that are so important to us when we're planning future care. The access to good rehabilitation centres and to various aids and equipment is reliant on the availability of funding. And we all are very, very aware of our funding issues now. And the outcomes, the best outcomes, clearly are following the provision of adequate funding, adequate rehabilitation and adequate support that's provided on a holistic basis, particularly involving the psychological aspects as well as the more obvious physical side of things.
Great, thanks for that, Kate. And last but not least, Toria and Darren from STEPS.
Hi, I'll go first. Is that right, Darren? Hi, so I'm Toria. I'm one of the co-founders of STEPS Rehabilitation. So we're a specialist rehabilitation centre based in Sheffield. So we provide residential rehabilitation for people who've had life-changing injuries. So people who have had spinal cord injuries, as well as people who've had brain injury or other complex orthopedic and combinations of sort of life-changing catastrophic injury. So we've been open just 6 years now. Like Dee, I qualified 30 years ago as well as physio at St Mary's in London, and have sort of worked in a variety of different things over the years. But kind of the passion for opening STEPS as a family business sort of came really from seeing, again, as things people have said already, just people not being in a position where they can achieve their potential and access the rehabilitation and care that they need, and just sort of seeing a lot of people discharged inappropriately to sort of either a care home or to live in sort of one room existence at home without proper facilities and access to therapy. And so decided it might be a good idea to build a rehab centre, which then obviously took a little bit of work and planning, and probably about a 6-year period before we opened the doors to STEPS. And over the years, we've sort of developed all our pathways, but the spinal injury side of rehab has been particularly interesting, and I would say it's the area that we have the most inquiries for across the different clients we work for. And we have 23 beds, and it's not uncommon for at least 10 of those to be occupied by people with spinal cord injury. So they have obviously various different levels, and I think as some of the other guests today have commented, I think one of the key things, funding is obviously massively impacting access to rehab for people, and the length of time people are spending in spinal injury units is significantly reduced to what it used to be. So I guess that's one thing where things aren't as good as they used to be in the old days, and people are often being discharged after 3 to 6 months, so they haven't got the tools they need to equip them for having their the opportunities and access to what they need to achieve their potential and have a good quality of life or the education that they need. So we're seeing people come to us much earlier, and sort of with a lot of work and support needed. I guess I'll let you introduce yourself, Dan, but okay. You're very fundamental to that at STEPS.
So my name's Darren, and my background is qualified 20 years ago as a nurse, and I worked for the majority of that time at the Sheffield Spinal Injury Centre. I did the acute side, straight from traffic accidents and A&E beds right through to rehab and discharge home. Absolutely love my time in Sheffield. As everybody's already alluded to, 20 years ago, it was a wonderful place, very positive, lots of energy going forward. Unfortunately, over the years, we've seen that decline, as a lot of places have done, with the patient charters coming in and reduction in funding across the board.
Oh, we seem to have lost Toria and Darren there. I'm sure they'll come back. So let's move on. And Harvey, if I could come to you firstly, we've already touched on a number of big emerging sort of themes and issues there. I'm really keen to understand from panelists what you think the big issues are, opportunities or challenges with reference to the future of spinal injury care and how it's improved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of people have echoed the issues about funding, and I won't go too much into that, but perhaps talking about opportunities would be a really good idea. So I think we're entering a really interesting era whereby not just neurotechnology, but also the biology is far it's more understood than ever before. We're seeing first generation therapeutics being developed. And therefore, that gives us an opportunity to start to be visionary about what we think care pathways should look like. And I think that's really important, that we take a step back and say, okay, well, do you know what? First and second generation therapeutics are in the pipeline. They're within a decade. And therefore, how should we define what a care pathway looks like and at what part on the pathway this will impact lives and, of course, function and independence off the back of that. So I think that's really important. And I think for us at Spinal Research, but also at Neurokinex, we try to think 10 years down the line, what will this look like? And what types of conversations do we need to have? And then, of course, what kind of evidence and data and conversations and partners we need to have at the table to make that real.
Thanks for that, Harvey. Derek, thoughts from you on those sort of big and emerging issues?
I asked my friendly artificial intelligence system last night for 10 topics that would be important in the development of spinal care, and it came up with a list of 10, some of which I agree with and some of which I don't. Having been involved in research for a long time, I think one of the things that always frustrated me is how long it took for things to go from fundamental research into practice. And sometimes research and evidence leads us down blind alleys because we start out on one track and then other people pile into this as if it's fashionable, but we never quite get to the end of the journey. So I'm kind of looking for things that, yes, have an evidence that backs them and supports them, but things that are likely to become real in people's lives in the near future. So I'm interested in things like neuromodulation, which includes things like electrical stimulation, which is great for long-term cardiovascular fitness and keeping muscle tone and even metabolic status good. I'm interested in neuroplasticity, which is a word that we see bandied around a lot, even though we don't understand it so much. I think we are gaining traction and we're learning much more how to recover function. Because for me, the way that we think in business is rehabilitation is about recovering whatever function you can and compensating for the rest. And we have technologies that help to recover function, and we have technologies that help people compensate, if you like, assistive technology. So we're constantly looking to push forward in both those areas. We're not at the moment developing, but we're influencing the manufacture and design of some of this technology. So for me, the key things that we'll see are advances in neuroplasticity, advances in neuromodulation, and maybe other people would agree with that. I think Harvey also, I think, is talking about regenerative medicine, which is really exciting. The fact that you could perhaps rescue the damaged spinal cord in the very early stages of recovery and accelerate what's possible for people to recover as they go through the rehab journey. But that's not something we're involved in a business, but we see how influential that can be if we can only get it right.
Can I ask, Derek, across some of the areas that you mentioned there, are there factors that would allow additional speed or pace with reference to commercialization and getting new and better treatments or medicines, therapeutics through to patients?
I think with anything to do with healthcare, it's staggeringly complex, and there are many confounding factors. So research in rehabilitation has never actually been that attractive a proposition for many clinicians. You know, it's sort of been second best when it comes to getting funding. So I think you have the complexity of the task is very high, and it's still perhaps not been very fashionable in the past to work in research and rehabilitation. I think that's improved as we've had things like robotics and new technology coming up, which has made it more attractive for people to get involved. But I think these are the main obstacles.
Thanks for that, Derek. Dee, you already in your introduction maybe hinted at some areas that require work. Could you talk a bit about the big issues as you see them and the areas of focus?
I mean, I'm in the Northeast, so I don't have an exact sense of the inequities between spinal injury units. But I think a big issue is the the training of therapists and within the NHS to ensure that they have the specialist skills for spinal injury, but also the vision for what is possible. I think I was lucky enough to not only just be working on the unit, but I used to work for the backup, not I volunteer with backup, but be involved with sports for people who have spinal injuries. And then as a therapist, that in your mind, you have this vision for what is possible for someone. And I think now I'm hearing people come out, people who have some amazing, and I'm normally we work with people who are paraplegic, but because my specialism is upper limb rehab, I'm normally working with your cervical level injuries. And you've got young people with great potential who in the past, say a C6 complete, where you would be like, wow, we could really get this person really independent. They're coming out with a sense of zero hope for their future, zero vision for what is possible for their lives. So how we train people, one, in the specialism of upper limb rehab, and also how we allow therapists to, I'm not sure what other people would think, that whether on units, whether you've got newer staff coming through and then some of us older staff, some people with experience leaving, and then this gap in this transference of skill from people who have a lot of experience, and then you've got new staff coming through who probably within their training at university had very little spinal injury training. How we then put therapists on the ground that really kind of have this specialist skill. I don't know, I waffled a little bit there, but hopefully you got the sense of what I meant.
Well, that's helpful, Dee. Can I just ask a sort of follow-on question? You referred to this again in your introduction as well, the sense that levels of expectation and the aspiration for the very best outcomes might be somehow less than it once was. What's driving that? Is it about people not having the skills? Is it about lack of availability of the people that will help and improve those outcomes, or is there more to it than that?
I'm not sure. I think, it starts with the issue of people being on an acute bed waiting for a spinal injury bed for too long. And then they get onto the spinal unit. And I think and I'm just hearing this secondhand because I'm only talking, I'm just reflecting what clients' experiences have been, that they've had quite limited amount of hands-on rehab during the time that they're on the unit. And as you mentioned earlier, the time that people are on the unit is now shorter. So I think it's become where we're getting people to just a sort of basic functional level to enable them to get home. And then we've got limited rehab services in the community. So they're going home in a normally a micro environment, hospital bed, and they haven't. And I think what's a shame, the missed potential is there's some simple things that we could have taught that family and that person to do as part of their home program. So even if we've got limited service, there's some very simple things, and like the FES that Derek's referring to. I mean, that's something that's so easy to train someone to do at home and gives them huge potential and really supports recovery. And if we haven't enabled people by giving them the skills when they leave hospital, so even if services are a bit limited, they've got the ability to, and they're empowered to do it themselves. I don't know. I think that's where somehow, I think that's a sort of simple solution to a big picture problem of, staff training and not enough services for clients and not enough rehab time. But let's teach people some very, very simple things that they can do for themselves to work towards the goal that, maybe you're not at that goal of doing sliding board transfers by the time you leave hospital. But if you've been told that is something you have the potential to do, and we're going to train you how to do FES on your triceps, and we're going to train you to do FES for your wrists, and we're going to teach you how some simple things that you can practice to use your hands functionally. And these are all fairly low cost things. Even if it's a Sabo glove to help them grasp and release if they have that potential. So, yeah, I think there's some simple things like that. I'm not sure why that's missing. And it does seem very particularly that people are telling me they've really had nothing done to their arms, and they're coming to us and they've already got contractures to the point where we've sort of lost the chance to do what they could have done before. And that's always very sad. If someone's got a contracture and they had the potential to be pretty independent with their arms, then that's a real shame.
Thanks, Dee. Kate, you might want to follow on from that or identify the big issues as you see them with reference to the future of care.
Very much so. It's education, and as Dee says, it's not only the therapies. My discipline's nursing. Nurses have very limited amount of time in caring for spinal injured clients. And we know that when our clients, due to a urinary tract infection or chest infection that has to be treated in hospital to have IV antibiotics, they will deteriorate rapidly while they're on a general ward, which is why we send our teams and personal assistants into hospital to work with them. We know that so often, and Dee pointed out, when somebody gets admitted to an acute ward, general hospital, before they can be moved to a spinal ward or specialist centre or unit, there's a lot of complications that may well have started to develop pressure sores, for instance, particularly, in fact, before actually we can get them to a rehab unit. And then what happens, they have to spend quite a lot of time on bed rest till this pressure sore heals before they can actually start the work that should have been started weeks and weeks, months sometimes beforehand. But it isn't only a case of educating therapists, nurses and other healthcare professionals. It's also the public, and the public really don't understand spinal injury apart from the paralysis aspect. They have no idea of the whole loss to that person's life. Very few people have any grasp or understanding of that, and I think we need to educate the public much more on what it means to be spinally injured and the different levels of injury and an incomplete and complete spinal injury. So education, training is lacking, and it's getting less. We were in a better position 5-10 years ago than actually we probably are now, despite all the advances, or the technical advances, the regeneration that was being talked about a great deal at one point, and the neuromodulation prospects. But people need to have things to live for, and our motto is life is for living. And people need to have a therapeutic leisure pursuits to follow. They need to have the thought of planning for a holiday that they can go with their friends and their family. And it's something that we are taking into particular account at Community Case Management Services, is this therapeutic leisure activities, and the improvement that our clients make when they go away. They come back with that improvement, that they suddenly, the whole life lifts. And it's there's a huge psychological and emotional element to it, but it shouldn't be ignored. And when people have hope, which you touched on, Dee, that when you get home, you're going to be able to, we will continue to do this and achieve and have a quality of life, then it makes a big difference to what's going to happen. But if they go home and you've got a hospital bed, a commode and a gas fire sort of scenario in the front room, then your mental health is going to deteriorate very quickly. And I could go on for ages, but I won't. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That opens up quite a few threads. I'm sure we'll come back to. And Toria and Darren from STEPS, you know, the big issues as you see them that will determine a brighter future for the future of spinal care.
First and foremost, apologise we got cut off earlier, but just catching the end of what Dee was saying and then Kate, I have to fully agree that the difference between 10, 15, 20 years ago as to what's happening right now, the education of therapists and nurses across the board has deteriorated, not purely because of what they're getting, it's because of the funding around that, and the stress levels have changed completely. Whereas at one time the spinal units used to be a set of standalone units and protected, now tend to be part of a bigger trust that can be cherry picked as and when. And so that the education is not there at the beginning with the nurses, so they're finding it more difficult to pass on to the patients themselves. So as and when, as Kate just quite rightly mentioned, the times in the trauma centres that's longer to get to the specialist centres, they're coming into with pressure sores and things like that. So the rehab time in the centres are shorter, and hence they're being discharged with minimal education. Which all that has a knock-on effect then, as you quite rightly said, about mental health issues and confidence issues, which also creates just a boomerang for patients going back into hospitals for their further pressure sores or UTIs and knock-on effects, which just reduces their ability to start living an active and full life. Now, we all know that these guys and girls are so positive in what they want to do, and with the stories we can all tell of the people that achieve and go on to continue to achieve, why that can't be given across the board, and that support to be given across the board. It's not rocket science, it's simple basics. Get the basics right, the education in at the start, and build on that. And this is what we're trying to do here. This is what my role is here, to try and educate as many people as we can. And going on to what the therapy stuff that we do here with Toria, and hoping that some of these people go out back into the community to shout about being a spinal cord injury, achieving the things that they want to achieve. And the more people can get doing that, the more noise we can make about the spinal cord injury world. And I'm a big believer in that us in the spinal world are a big family. We all know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And the more we can shout about it and bang that drum, the better we can be. And obviously, we go on to the therapy stuff that Toria is more, the more modern therapies that we're doing here is just enhancing that.
But I think it's having, it's having access to all those things under one roof, and I think that's what we've been able to build at STEPS. We've got great nurses, and with Darren's support, providing education for the nurses, and the therapy assistants, and the rehab assistants, and the clients, because Darren provides obviously a lot of education for the clients when they come, who are often very vulnerable and quite often, not always, but quite often not in a good place and quite demoralised at the time they arrive to us, because they think that they're going to have had all this amazing rehab. Sadly at the moment, due to funding, mostly that's not what's happening, and we do have people coming to us from quite a few different spinal injury units over in the UK, from Glasgow, Oswestry, Penderfield, Stoke Mandeville, Southport, James Cook. So we kind of are hearing the same kind of stories from most of the clients that come to us from a range of units. So it is definitely a national issue, and being able to have access, the clients that do get funded to come here, they do have access to a completely holistic program with the care and all the different therapies. And as again Kate said, getting people out in the community as well. Once they're at that stage, we've got a couple of vehicles, and we can kind of get people out doing sports and leisure activities, or whatever. It's tapping into really either previous interest they want to go back to, or something new they haven't thought of or even considered before. Seeing those possibilities, and then sort of enhancing the sort of hands-on and the more traditional therapies with that technology. And obviously we've had one of Derek's bikes right from when we opened. That was one of our key bits of equipment we knew we wanted right from the beginning. So MDS is been a really important part of our rehab, and like Dee, and we've got various different bits of equipment, a few things in common, haven't we? And that we're using that are great, and some of the new Fourier kit and the sort of Exomotus has been brilliant for a lot of our clients with spinal cord injuries, and you can work with people of any level of injury, and just the psychological benefits of somebody to be in that position, and as they walk from the gym through to the cafe, they're at the same height or quite often taller than a lot of the other staff. They can walk into the cafe, and it's just so lovely to kind of see that, and see the buzz that people get from that, and how they can then interact with other people and start to kind of feel just like themselves again, and see that hope and possibility of what their future can be and look like going forwards.
Thanks, Toria. I mean, you talked a little bit there about sort of innovation and some of the things that Derek's been making sure sort of reach the market. I'd like to come back to that, but if we stick with patient support and access, Harvey, how important is it and how successfully are the people who require treatment being made aware of what's available and how they access? Because that must be a big issue, making sure people know what is possible and what they can have access to.
Absolutely. And it's very, very difficult to market to this population. For a business, and hopefully everyone agrees, it's very difficult to choose where your marketing budget is going to go be spent upon. Some people are digitally savvy, so they're looking at social media platforms. There's a variety of platforms. Others want brochureware. They want access to brochureware in GPs' offices, in major trauma centres, in the spinal injury centres, at community hubs. And even then it doesn't land. So it is really difficult for us to get a kind of a shortcut to signposting, but we work with as many partners as possible. So of course the SIA, Backup and Aspire, they have a presence at the spinal injuries units. They're starting to grow their presence at the major trauma centres, and especially the Spinal Injuries Association more recently are taking a very association-based approach to signposting to partners. So that is something that Neurokinex has been able to benefit from. And especially for our step up scheme, which is a play on the step down terminology, whereby people that have been discharged from spinal injury centres with a new spinal cord injury can access at least a handful of sessions to learn about what they could potentially do then at home and translate into home. And that has been something that has been quite successful. It's given people access to something that they wouldn't normally have the means to in the community, and giving them ideas of how they can improve their home rehabilitations programs. But access to information is difficult. I think everyone does their very best to promote the good services that they provide, I think. And I think it is quite a challenge. We are lucky that we do have these other user charities that are able to signpost services where appropriate. A tricky one, I would say. And of course, the churn within the spinal injury centres that we're seeing at the moment means that people forget, or we lose information about the services that are available in the community as well. So that means we have to constantly keep going back to the centres and presenting to the staff about what is available out there in the world beyond the hospitals.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Dee? You're putting your hand up there on access.
I'm just interested in what people's thoughts were, given that we're in this digital age, that we couldn't create some kind of, the royal we being, I don't know who, but a digital platform of education that all spinal units could use, which, you know, has videos and information starting from bladder and bowels to skin to positioning to you know, transfers, access to the community, travel, simple home programs that people can do, links to to products, which will have a big range of cost, obviously, but there are some lower cost products that can be extremely helpful, or even just like through active hands, like little gadgets that are, you know, make a massive difference in someone's functional skills. It just seems like education, like Kate talked about, and back in our day, people had a very comprehensive education program that they received in the spinal unit and then left with, and I think some of that is lost now. And it just seems, given that we have the technology now, that could be something. And then that would also address the issue of equity of education, because depending what unit you were on and who was your therapist and who was your nurse and what was available at that time, if we've got something that is available to everyone as well as family members and the wider community, then it seems that you would address some of that equity issue in regard to education. Obviously that's a big piece of work, but
there is just one barrier to that, and so I think there are groups that are trying to build digital resources to share this type of information. One of the barriers to this has been that because it is not equitable, if there are services out there that are private, people are unwilling to share that information.
Any other thoughts? And Darren?
Yeah, I did suggest this a few years ago, Dee, when I worked, just before I left the NHS and the Sheffield Spinal Injuries Unit, that Paul Harrison, I worked with the lovely Paul Harrison, that I'm sure we all know, for many, many years, and learned so much from him. But with the digital era coming in, every patient now has got a television above their heads. Why couldn't we, as a spinal, there's only a small number of spinal units, get together as clinical educators to come up with a national policy of how to do bowels in several different ways, how to do catheters in all the different ways, how to manage things, and how to structure your life going forward. Put it in a place so that we all can speak the same language across the board. We can all get on a digital stick. We can stick it to the televisions at the back of the beds and watch it as many times as we want. We can take it home, share it with the families. I'm a big believer it's there. It doesn't take away the teaching from individual professionals. They've got something there they can relate back to. And it was, it's probably a good idea, but then it dies a death. Which is the real shame of it, because then it can give you a platform to add on the charities and the products and everything else if you wish to. But sorry, Derek, sorry.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you, Darren. I was just, I wrote a book recently for newly injured spinal cord people, available now on Amazon. But what I see quite commonly is lots of people who've purchased inappropriate equipment, maybe equipment that doesn't work well together. So I think the lucky ones in this equation are people who happen to have the guidance of case managers. And I know it's very challenging for case managers to be aware of what's emerging and new technology, but at least there's someone that can help guide them through the morass. And of companies sometimes, unfortunately, will sell at all costs. Hopefully we would never do that, but there is that danger of people offering something which in isolation looks like a great product, but maybe doesn't work well for that person because of other things happening in their life.
What's the name of your book?
It's called Don't Back Down.
Good title.
Free copy for any of you.
Oh, okay. Yes, definitely. Thank you, Derek.
Into that.
I think one of the things that we find, which I know case managers like when their clients do come to STEPS, is because within STEPS, we've got a lot of different equipment that people can try, but also we'll work with lots of different people and different reps and sort of get different products, new things that have been around for years, all different things available that we can sort of get people to come in, demo them, try them out, so people can really just get a good feel for kind of what they like, what works for them, and just knowing, like you were saying, what's out there. And from Active Hands, as Dee mentioned, who have so many great gadgets that are very inexpensive, a lot of them, to obviously the all dancing kind of more expensive, fancy wheelchairs and tech that's out there. There's such a range of different things that can enhance, the quality of life and independence.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt. Can I just say that working on from the video side of things and the training videos, what I have done is I've done bespoke video training of the actual client being cared for the personal assistants to make use of, and for the family to understand. So there's a clip that's suitable for the family, rather without going into the more private, intimate care side of things. There's a clip for the personal assistants for how they may do a bladder washout, how they may care for that client. And there's another clip that's for the client themselves to pull up every now and then and see what activities, what they can do with their life, where they can go. We have a property in France that's fully adapted with an attached gîte for high level spinal, and also a large house that's attached to it for the family to go all together, and understand that there are places out there that you can go to live with your family. I mean, how many times do we organise a holiday and they say they've got this, that, and the other, and when they get there, they find that it's not what was advertised to be, and that happens time and time again. But I think what we need to do is give people hope. And yes, I know a lot's dependent on funding, but there are things that can actually be taken forward if their family, their friends, and the care provision they're being provided has had adequate training in providing that bespoke care for that client. So it's really bringing it down to the individual client-centered training and meeting their needs on a risk and need-led basis all the way through. But that changes because we know, sadly, whatever we do, there's an accelerated aging process and the independent functional ability will deteriorate. But we ought to try and make sure we preserve that independent functional ability for as long as possible.
Yeah,
The
training that Darren, sorry, I was going to say, with the training that Darren does is not just for our team, but he trains the care teams that are going to be looking after our clients when they go home. So they come in and do a programme with Darren of kind of classroom education as well as hands-on, and where appropriate, we will sort of do sort of videos around sort of techniques and things that the team can use as well. And it's a really helpful resource, isn't it, to be able to do that. Because
when a client comes out of the hospital, he's got all the professionals around them. They've got other people with them, and Harvey will know this, who are living this very highly disciplined lifestyle. And because everybody's doing it around, when they go home, they're on their own. They've lost that motivation. Oh, I'll spend a bit longer in bed. Oh, I won't really move myself around. Or I won't. It's 5 hours, and I'll leave the catheter for a bit later. Things like this start to creep in, and that's where we have the difficulties. So having case managers, if you're fortunate enough to have one, and you've got a personal assistant that ensures that you are continuously being given the motivation to care for yourself because you've got things to do with that precious life, makes all the difference.
Can I just move the discussion on a little bit? I mean, talking about potentially having one digital platform and no wrong door leads me to ask about collaboration, and whether or not collaboration is a key feature of the world that we're talking about today, or whether or not it can be improved so that you've got end-to-end care with a sort of golden thread that runs through it, you know, from research through to technology development through to patient support. Is collaboration a feature of the way in which spinal injury care is delivered at the moment, or should it be a bigger feature of the way that we work in the future? I don't know, Harvey, if you'd like to comment on that first.
Yeah, sure. So collaboration is always a good thing, and so there's no bigger fan of collaboration than I. I think when resources are scarce, we're not naturally collaborative. We're all in survival mode potentially. I mean, again, I can only speak for the charities that I work for, of course. So we do need ways to be able to incentivize collaboration. But you're right, we need to, as I started out, we need to step back and we need to design an end-to-end care pathway that is fit for purpose, that is fit for the future, and allows people to thrive in their life and not just survive. And it right now deteriorate, unfortunately. So collaboration is so important. And that goes also for research as well. So the field of research, whether it's low-level biology and discovery science or engineering solutions and products, those that collaborate tend to have the best outcomes and also attract the best funding, of course.
Derek, I mean, that's very much your area, research, technology development. Is there a great deal of collaboration there, or could it be improved? Would it change the speed at which products and services are market?
As Harvey's said, certainly collaboration is essential to research. Basically, you won't get funding trying to do things in isolation. Unfortunately, I think our disconnection from Europe is unhelpful. I think we need bigger groups rather than smaller ones. And when I was certainly working in research, one thing that was obvious to me is that you would never read a research paper that says this is the end of the story, we've got all the answers. It typically says there's need for more research, and this goes on forever. And I think somebody at a strategic level needs to step back and look at what research is ready for implementation, if only in a limited and controlled sense. I think a little bit more urgency about getting research into practice has always been something that, you know, I've been keen on. I have to say, you know, just reflecting on the sort of conversation so far, nobody ever said to me when they've had a spinal cord injury that they got too much therapy inside hospital. And some people certainly leave feeling quite deflated and lost. You know, they don't have a sense of direction for their lives. And I think what STEPS have done and what Neurokinex and others like them is give people hope and give them a sense of direction. And as I said right at the beginning, you know, I'm keen on looking at health span, developing things that extend quality of life, which is a sort of big picture type of thinking. And obviously there's lots of pieces to that puzzle. It includes things like how you physically look after yourself, how you manage your mental state, your nutrition, all of that. So I'd like to see some of the diverse threads of research that don't seem to belong specifically to spinal cord injury to be brought into play, because as humans, we're all interested in living longer and living healthier, and exactly the same things apply to the whole population as they do to those with spinal cord injury. So my feeling about research is, rather than, yes, collaborate on specific things for spinal cord injury, but let's also look a bit broader and see what health research can be brought to bear for you know, the whole population.
Thanks, Derek. Dee, Kate, Toria, any thoughts on collaboration when it comes to actually, you know, working alongside patients and making sure that they have access to all of the services? Is that happening so that it's joined up, or is it a little more fragmented than you would like?
I think there's lots of room for progression in collaboration between private clinics and NHS services, and I think there probably is a little bit of defensiveness at the moment. That's just my sense, because NHS services can feel like, well, you're sort of lucky enough to have these extra resources. It's obviously easy for us to sort of you know, to be excited about all these things, and they don't have that time, you know, as much time as we get with our clients, and we don't have the same equipment, and they don't have the same equipment and resources. But still, I think the essence of it is that the therapists in the NHS and the therapists in the private clinic still have the same. Their goal is to achieve the best thing for our clients, and so if we can sort of start with that we all have the same vision and hope. Yes, we maybe have access to some different resources, but what essentially can we do to make sure people are getting the best care and the best education and the best physical and mental mental health services? So I think there's lots and lots of scope for progress with that.
An area that is sometimes difficult is when you've got a child. And they're at school and you've got local authority therapists, and you start to introduce some private therapy because during the summer holidays everything stops, and you want them to work towards in a collaborative way, and you do tend to find there's an element of hostility because of the feeling that someone's being judged on what they've been able to provide. And we know that the provision that a therapist wants to provide, they cannot provide through lack of resources, time, funding, etc. But that's where the case manager skills come in, to draw them together and make sure that we have a pathway, a clear plan of what we're working to, using all that's available to that particular, usually children particularly, that can be moved on. And there's a continuation of what's to be achieved, both when they're at home and when they're at school. And that's really, really important from the childhood years, educational childhood years. With our ECHPs, that was a great step forward, but we still, as you say, still get this fragmented approach.
Yeah, and I think obviously touching on what you've both said as well, I mean, collaboration, of course, is key to give someone the best opportunities. And when we're working towards discharge for clients, so sometimes clients come to us straight from spinal injury units or other hospitals, and sometimes they come to us from home. But if there's already a therapy team involved, then obviously we very much work with them and keep them involved while the client's with us, so that we can make sure it's very joined up when they go back. And that might be privately with a company like Neural Pathways, or it might be, statutory services. But we sort of, and we do have some of those challenges that you guys have referred to as well. But it does very much vary depending on the area. And I think the camaraderie and the peer support that clients gain when they're with us, not just with other clients with spinal injuries, but actually all the clients here have gone through something life-changing, and they build up really good support networks together. And a lot of our clients continue to stay in touch with each other and sort of pop back and see us, and that's really nice to see. And you see them going on to support each other and share ideas as well. So there's kind of lots of positivity around sharing those ideas.
Yes, it's just a little bit like, I mean, we see people come through here that have struggled initially, and they've gone on to work in various charities and SIA, and just taken on board their difficulties initially, where they experience as they travel through their rehab, when difficult periods, then it's plateaued for a little while, they come here and moved on again, and the peer support they get from the therapist, the other clients here, and the education that they absorb, then wanted to take it back out to the wider spinal family out there, working with newer clients in the trauma centres and various communities that they work in. It's just going back to that continual support, that collaboration. No matter where it happens, it should happen all the way through. But as long as we get some of it started and try to disseminate it back down again to where we want it to be, right at the very roots of where we are, and build from the bottom back up to encourage that strength of the community, the spinal community.
Thanks, Darren. I'm going to now sort of try and draw the threads of our discussion together by asking each of the panelists for some concluding remarks. Really a short, sharp description from each panelist of what you think the priorities are with reference to making the future of spinal injury care better. And as we've just been speaking to you, Toria and Darren, if I could start with you, just a nice, concise description of what you think needs to change.
Well, that's hard. We could talk for hours, I think. I think we've all sort of touched on, funding is a huge issue, but I think, trying to be succinct, it's how we can work together to allow maximum access to what is out there for people. And I think hope and possibility in people seeing what the future can hold is so important. And I think so many people are kind of told everything they can't do, and there's so much people can do. They've just got to do it in a different way. And I think giving people that hope and passion and belief is just key, and everything else kind of underpins that. That's my attempt at being succinct.
Yeah, to me, it's about support and education right from the very beginning, open, and encouraging people to be themselves. doesn't matter what you want to do, where you want to go, be yourself and achieve everything that you want to achieve in your life, and giving them the wherewithal to try and achieve that. You know, that's what we're here for, and that's what we want to do.
Great, that's brilliant. Thanks, Toria. Thanks, Darren. Kate, your big priorities for the future?
We've all said it: education, collaboration, psychological support is extremely important. It's not very often provided. Everybody has a spine injury, a life-changing event, needs psychological support. It's not always accepted, but it depends on the way it's addressed, because they need to know that they've got a quality of life ahead of them. And that's so important. And I'll end up with life is for living.
Thanks, Kate. Dee.
Just before I say my piece, Kate, I would love if you would share the link to your property in France, because we would definitely share that with clients. So I'm really echoing what everyone else was saying, is empower people with knowledge, and then provide people with a vision and hope for a purposeful future.
Thanks, Dee. Derek.
Yeah, we all excuse me. We all have an opportunity to share attitudes and beliefs that raise people up rather than squash hope. And I think we all have a responsibility working in this field to do just that. It's so easy to focus on the negative aspects and the constraints that we have to deal with, but it's so easy and costs very little to raise people's attitudes and point them in the right direction.
Thank you, Derek. And you get the final word, Harvey.
Thanks. Obviously, I echo everybody else's comments. I think they were really important. Just to kind of double down, we do need to tackle head on the community rehabilitation gap. So we have to talk about that at a strategic level, at a nationwide strategic level. That's really important. And a workforce that is fit for purpose in community rehabilitation as well, given there's so much technology and so much innovation happening in this space, which is obviously an exciting era for us, but we need to plan for it if we're going to deliver on it.
It's no use if people don't have access to the technology.
Thank you, Harvey. It just remains for me to thank everybody that is watching. If you are watching, please share this content far and wide. It's been an enormously positive and encouraging roundtable and discussion today. I think anybody listening to this will leave with a vast amount of hope for the future of spinal injury care. I'd like to thank our panelists who have contributed so brilliantly today. We've covered so many different areas, and I'm sure some of those watching will want to get in touch with our panelists. And with your permission, through the NR Times team, we'll make sure that that contact's possible. So thank you for watching. Thank you to all of our panelists for making this such a positive and worthwhile discussion. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.